All right, let's dive into the absolutely fascinating story of Roman money. This is the first of a three-part journey, and it's all based on the fantastic research of Sung K-yu from the Institute for Political and Economic Alternatives. Now, for our French-speaking audience, this is also part 5 of our bigger series, L'Histoire de la Monnaie. So let's get right to it, because at the heart of the Roman Republic lies a really interesting paradox. Just look at these two things. On one side, you've got this rough, kind of shapeless lump of bronze. And on the other, the iconic silver denarius, the coin that would pretty much define an empire. The story of how one became the other is really the story of Rome itself. But the real question isn't just how it happened, it's why it took so incredibly long. And this is where things get really weird. The entire Mediterranean world, we're talking Greece, the city-states in southern Italy, you name it, they had all switched to silver coinage. But Rome, right in the middle of this sea of silver, it stayed this stubborn island of bronze. Why? What was going on? I mean, the time lag here is just staggering. We are talking about a 400-year gap. But here's the thing you have to understand. This wasn't because Rome was somehow backward or anything like that. The key, the absolute crucial point, is that for centuries, Rome's unique society just, well, it didn't need silver. And to get why, we first have to unlearn a really popular myth about what money is in the first place. So before we can even begin to crack the Roman paradox, we've got to take a quick detour and redefine what money actually is. Because that story you hear all the time about how it got started, yeah, it's mostly wrong. So the myth goes something like this. Money was invented to make shopping easier, right? To solve that classic problem of a farmer trying to trade a chicken for a pair of sandals. It sounds totally logical, but here's the thing. The historical evidence just doesn't back it up. That idea is really a modern fiction that we've kind of projected onto the past. The reality is actually so much more profound. Money began its life as a system of accounting. It was a language, a way to record obligations. I mean, think about it like Aristotle did. For justice to work, you have to be able to compare different things. How do you compare, say, a bushel of wheat to a soldier's duty? You need an abstract unit to measure them both. Money wasn't invented for the market. It was invented for the courthouse and the temple as a tool to put a number on debts, fines, and tribute. And you can see this playing out clear as day in the world's first great civilizations. Over in Mesopotamia, the shekel wasn't a coin in your pocket. It was a unit of weight on a clay tablet, a record. In Egypt, the dibbin was a unit of account to value all the grain stored in the state granaries, which basically acted like the first central banks. In both cases, money was a tool for the state, a way to manage what people owed to the community. Okay, so if money is a language for social obligation, what was Rome saying with bronze? Why did its system stick with this one metal for so long while everyone else was speaking the language of silver? Well, the answer comes down to 3 key things that made early Rome totally unique. Reason number 1, it's literally written in the ground beneath their feet. Simple geology. The Italian peninsula was loaded with copper and bronze, but it had very, very few silver mines. Greece, on the other hand, especially Athens, was basically sitting on mountains of silver. So Rome just did the logical thing. It built its monetary language with the material it had tons of. Second, you have to remember that early Rome wasn't a big seafaring trading power, not at all. It was an inward-looking, agricultural society. Its economy was pretty much closed, built on what its own citizens could grow on their own land. And if you're not doing a lot of large-scale international trade, you just don't need an international currency like silver. It's that simple. And get this, their own language tells the whole story. The Latin word for money, pecunia, comes directly from their word for cattle, pecus. For an early Roman, true wealth wasn't a shiny pile of metal. No way. It was a healthy herd of livestock. That was real value. But the third reason, this one might just be the most important of all. Rome's biggest rivals, places like Carthage and the Greek states, they relied on mercenaries, professional soldiers who, of course, demanded payment in silver because it was accepted everywhere. But in the Roman Republic, military service was a civic duty. It was for citizens who owned land. It was what they called a tax of blood, not a paid job. The army simply didn't need a huge payroll of silver coins. So Rome had this very unique system built on bronze. But don't mistake that for being primitive or static, because this system evolved in a really cool way. basically developing the grammar of coinage long before it ever touched silver. It all started with something called Aes Rude, just simple lumps of bronze. Their value was literally whatever they weighed on a scale. But then came Aes Signatum, bronze bars that were stamped with the symbol. Now this was a huge leap forward because now the state was guaranteeing the weight and the quality. And finally, they developed Aes Grave, these big, heavy cast bronze coins. They looked like coins, but their value was still all about the weight of the metal inside. Rome was basically learning the language of money completely on its own terms. And this bronze-based system, it served Rome really well for centuries. It was stable, it was perfectly suited to their society. But then, an event happened. An event that would completely shatter this world and force Rome, finally, to join the Silver Age. And that catalyst was war. We're talking about the Punic Wars against Carthage. And this wasn't some little border dispute. Oh no, this was a multi-generational total war for control of the entire Mediterranean. It was a fight for the very survival of Rome itself. And it pushed every single one of Rome's old systems right to the breaking point. All of a sudden, every single reason for sticking with bronze became a massive liability. Rome now had to operate on an international scale. It had to buy grain and supplies in places like Sicily, where nobody wanted their bronze. It had to raise bigger and bigger armies for longer and longer campaigns, which meant they finally had to start paying soldiers. And, trying to weigh giant chunks of bronze on a battlefield, it was just way too slow and clumsy for the logistics of a fast-moving war. So here it is, the crucial point of this whole story. Rome's adoption of the silver denarius was not some proactive move to modernize its economy. Not at all. It was a reactive, totally pragmatic decision that was forced on them by the brutal realities of war. They didn't adopt silver to get rich. They adopted it to survive. And this really brings us to the core lesson from Rome's journey, and it's captured perfectly in this idea. The need to wage war and maintain an army, more than the need to trade, is what determines the demand for money. For rising empires, it's military logistics, not commercial convenience, that's so often the real mother of monetary invention. And this one decision, born out of a crisis, had unbelievable consequences. By creating this unified silver currency, Rome built the monetary architecture that allowed it to scale up from just a regional power into a continent-spanning empire. I mean, this system would become the foundation for the entire European economy for more than 1,000 years. But that leaves us with a really provocative question, doesn't it? This powerful new tool, the denarius, it helped Rome conquer the world. But what did it do to Rome itself? As we're going to explore next time, the very coin that built the empire would also play a central role in breaking the republic. We'll dig into that next time.